You reach for the honey the way you reach for something you trust. A spoon into the tea. A drizzle over the kid's toast. A swirl into the oatmeal. Because it's natural. Because it's honey. Because honey is the one sweet thing in the house that was supposed to be honest. Here's the part nobody prints on the front of that little bear. There's a very good chance the jar in your cupboard was never fully honey to begin with, and you'd never taste the difference because it was engineered so you couldn't. Honey ranks near the top of the most counterfeited foods on Earth. Not now and then, as a system, at scale, on the very shelves you walk every single week. In one round of lab testing, more than 3 out of 4 jars pulled off American grocery shelves had been robbed of the one thing that proves honey ever came from a flower. 3 out of 4. Gone. And you didn't do anything wrong. You read the label. You bought the word pure, the word raw, the word organic. The label just wasn't telling you the truth. That's not your failure. That's the design. So do me a favor before we start. Drop the store where you buy your honey in the comments right now. Walmart, Kroger, Costco, Target, the little brand with the bear, whatever's in your pantry. By the end of this, you'll know exactly where it landed on this list and whether it belongs in the trash or gets to stay. Because here's the rule that runs through all 8 of these. The front of the jar is the sales pitch. The back is where it quietly tells on itself. And by the time we're done, you'll read it the way a lab does. I'm going to hand you 4 words the industry would rather you never learned. Ultrafiltration, mannose, transshipment, NAM. Learn to spot them on a label and you'll never stop seeing them. That $2 squeeze bear will never look quite so harmless again. And the jar that ranks worst? It isn't the cheapest one on the bottom shelf. It's the premium raw, unfiltered jar in the health aisle. The one you pay double for precisely because you think it's the pure choice. Let's start at number 8. For a long time, the assumption was tidy. Bottom shelf honey was the risky one. The expensive jar was the safe upgrade. Spend more, get purer. That was the trade we all thought we were making. Then the labs ran the numbers, and the deal fell apart. Back in 2011, Food Safety News bought more than 60 jars of honey across 10 states and had them tested by one of the country's top pollen scientists at Texas A&M. What came back rewrote the whole hierarchy, and it didn't care what you paid. Let me be straight with you, because the channels shouting the scary words won't be. This is not a fear video. Syrup-cut honey is not going to hurt you at breakfast. The crime here is mostly fraud, not danger. You are paying honey prices for something that costs a quarter as much to make. Put it in dollars. You hand over the price of real honey for a syrup blend that costs the packer pennies, jar after jar, year after year. A quiet tax on everyone who tried to buy the honest thing. A few of these jars really do carry something that has no business being in your tea, and we'll reach those. But mostly, this is about your wallet and your trust, in that order. One more piece of honesty up front. A missing pollen count, on its own, doesn't prove a single jar is fake. Some of it comes from ordinary filtering. So I'm not ranking these on one test. I'm ranking them on the weight of everything stacked against each one. Keep that in mind, and the order writes itself. Number 8. The no-name jar from the bottom shelf. You've seen it. The plain jar with the yellow lid. The words pure honey in plain black type, and a price so low that buying it almost feels thrifty. Sometimes it's the pharmacy label. Key V, Walgreens, Rite Aid. Sometimes it's just a barcode and a sticker. Nobody buys this one for the story. There is no story. That's the whole appeal. Here's your first secret word, ultrafiltration. It means the honey is heated thin and forced through a screen so fine that every last grain of pollen is pushed out. And pollen is the single thing in that jar a lab can use to say what flower fed it, what country it crossed, what hive it started in. Pull the pollen out, and the fingerprint is gone. In that testing, every last sample from drugstore shelves, 100%, came back with the pollen gone. Not most of them, all of them. So the cheapest, highest turnover honey in America is also the most faceless. No origin, no flower, no trail back to a hive. It's amber syrup that has legally rented the word honey for the label. It probably won't hurt you. But number 8 is the proof of concept for everything above it. Erase the origin, and no one at the counter can ever ask where it really came from. Now watch that same trick move upmarket. Number 7. The neighborhood grocery store brand. The Kroger jar, and the ones just like it. This isn't a warehouse. It isn't a discount box. It's the store. The one in your town, where you've done the weekly shop for years, where it feels less like a corporation and more like your store. That feeling of the familiar is exactly what's being spent here. Grocery store honey was the middle of that food safety news count. 76% of the samples from chains like Kroger, Safeway, Giant Eagle, and Harris Teeter had every trace of pollen filtered out. The same anonymizing move as the bottom shelf, just wearing a friendlier font and a name you trust. And think about who buys it: the family on a weekly budget, the senior on a fixed income who's bought the same jar for 20 years. People who aren't reading food safety reports. They just need honey, and they trust the store to carry something real. That trust isn't tested, it's assumed. And assumed trust is the cheapest ingredient a packer can put in the jar. The grocery store didn't set out to fool you. It set out to hit a price. The honey just got quiet on the way. Next comes the store that stamps a promise right on the front. Number 6, great value organic raw honey, Walmart's own label. Here the con puts on a costume. It isn't just honey now. It's organic and raw, 2 words printed right on the front. 2 words that add $1 to the price. 2 words families reach for in the budget aisle because they're trying to do a little better for their kids. This one actually went to court. A shopper in Illinois sued Walmart in 2023, pointing at a lab result. The great value organic raw honey came back with a mannose level about 3 times the international benchmark for pure honey. And here's your second secret word: mannose. It's a sugar that turns up when foreign syrups get blended in. Labs treat an elevated reading as a fingerprint for added sweetener. It's the same family of test as Key4 sugar, the older screen that catches cane and corn syrup. Now I promised you honesty, so here it is. Walmart won. A judge dismissed the case, and in 2025 a federal appeals court agreed, ruling that a high mannose reading, on its own, isn't proof the honey was cut, because mannose can occur naturally. So this is not fraud proven in court. What it is a reminder. Organic and raw on a mass market jar are marketing words first, and the one test that could actually settle it isn't run before the jar lands in your cart. Number 5, paid a designer to make sure you never think to ask. Number 5, Archer Farms. Target's honey, including the organic classic and the orange blossom. Target has a very specific problem. Everything looks too good. The store brand jar is clean, considered. The sort of packaging that quietly whispers you made a smart, deliberate choice just by lifting it off the shelf. Warm label, simple type, the kind of thing you'd photograph on the counter. That feeling is the product, not what's in the jar. Because Target sits in the big box tier, where that same testing found 77% of samples. Walmart, Costco, Target, Sam's had the pollen stripped out. And that organic on the organic classic? The seal only vouches for how the bees were supposedly managed. It doesn't run one test for added syrup. You can hold a perfectly certified organic jar of watered-down honey in your hand, and nothing about that seal would ever flag it. So you paid a little more for the nicer jar and the calmer font, and you carried home the exact same anonymized honey as the bottom shelf, just better lit. Gorgeous packaging wrapped around a hollow promise is still a hollow promise, and the next tier doesn't sell you a jar. It sells you a membership. Number 4, Kirkland Signature. Costco. Costco members are loyal, and for good reason. The Kirkland name has earned it over decades. The whole idea is that the vetting already happened. Somebody at corporate checked the supplier so you wouldn't have to. That handoff of trust is the whole reason the Kirkland label carries the weight it does. And it's exactly what makes this one sting. Kirkland honey sits in that same big box tier. The same 77%, the same ultra-filtered, pollen-gone profile as the rest. The membership card doesn't buy you a different supply chain. It just makes more people trust the jar without ever turning it over. And Costco changes the math in one particular way: volume. You don't buy a jar here. You buy the 2-pound jug. And honestly, maybe a second one, since the per-ounce price makes it feel silly not to. So you carry more of the problem home, and you feed it to more people over more months. Drizzle it on the toast. Stir it into the kids' warm lemon water when they're sick. Every scoop from that oversized jug might be doing about as much for you as the corn syrup back in the baking aisle. The bargain isn't always the number on the price tag. Sometimes it's hiding in what they quietly left out. Now the jar that leans on 100 years of goodwill to make you stop reading. Number 3, Sue Bee. The little bee on the label you've seen your whole life. You know this one. The cheerful bee. The name that sounds homemade. A handful of beekeepers somewhere in the Midwest, working their hives at first light. It sounds like Main Street, like something your grandmother kept in the cupboard. That feeling, American, wholesome, handshake honest, is the product. Sue Bee has been running on it for over 100 years. But the jar has been in court over what pure even means. In a certified class action in California, Sue Bee's parent, the Shoe Honey Association, was sued by a buyer who said the 100% pure label was false. The honey, she alleged, carried traces of glyphosate, the weed killer. The company disputes it, but the case was solid enough for a judge to certify the class. And here's your third secret word, because heritage is exactly where it likes to hide: transshipment. When cheap foreign honey needs to look domestic, it gets routed through a third country, relabeled as a product of that country, filtered clean so no pollen can betray where it was really born. The most all-American-looking label on the shelf is the perfect place to land honey that has traveled a very long, very quiet way. The bee has been smiling for a century. The contents haven't always earned the smile. Now the jar you were handed to trust because a cartoon told you it was safe. Number 2. The cartoon bear honey. Winnie the Pooh on the label, made by Honey Tree, sold right there in Walmart. Every kid knows Pooh Bear with his head stuck in the honey pot, and when a parent spots that jar, something happens. The guard drops. It looks innocent. It feels harmless. It feels like the honest pick for a child, which is the exact reason it works. When investigators sent this one to a lab, the finding matched nearly everything else on the shelf. Pollen completely removed. Gone. And when the maker got asked why, the reply wasn't a denial. It was that shoppers here like their honey to look perfectly clear. Perfecting clear is a polite word for ultra-filtered, and ultra-filtering washes out every marker that could prove the honey is real and traceable. Sit with that for a second. You bought this one specifically because the cartoon made it feel like someone cared what went inside. And underneath the cheerful label is honey that can't be traced to a country, a flower, or a hive. Kids are smaller. Everything hits their bodies at a higher concentration. Whatever goes into their warm milk at night should be held to a higher bar than the grown-up's tea, not a lower one. Pooh is a cartoon. The stripped-out pollen is not. Which brings us to the jar that collects the most trust it hasn't earned, from the people trying hardest to do everything right. Number 1. Nature Nates. 100% raw and unfiltered. Stay with me, because this is the turn. Nature Nates isn't hiding on the bottom shelf. It sits in the natural foods section, at eye level, right by the kombucha and the fancy nut butters. The font looks handwritten. The label says raw and unfiltered, big and confident. And that phrase is doing enormous work, because those exact words are what the most careful shopper in the store is hunting for. The parent reading every ingredient. The person who already figured out that ultra-filtered honey is a con and is actively steering around it. This brand was built to speak straight to them. Then came the lawsuits. Nature Nates got taken to court back in 2019 over that very word, raw. Scientists argued the honey was heated during bottling to around 120 degrees. And that kind of heat wrecks the very enzymes that let any honey call itself raw at all. Cook those off, and the word stamped on the front is just ink. The same suit alleged lab testing that pointed to added syrup sitting in the jar. And here's your fourth secret word, NAMR. It stands for nuclear magnetic resonance, the top-tier lab test that maps a honey's molecular signature and flags the fakes that slip past the cheaper screens. It's the machine most labs can't afford, which tells you exactly how much gets waved through by the ones that can. The company's response wasn't to publish independent lab results or open its sourcing records. It was to file a motion to dismiss, a legal move, not a transparency one. And that's the whole trick of this list, sitting in a single jar. The harder the front of the label promises purity, the more trust it collects, and the more that trust is worth spending. The most premium feeling, most health-hallowed honey on the shelf is exactly where the betrayal cuts deepest, because it targets the shoppers working hardest to get it right. Nothing on this list proves the rule harder. Now stop the countdown for a second, because none of this is random. Rewind to 2001. Washington slapped steep duties on the cheap honey pouring out of China, meaning to shield American beekeepers. That honey didn't disappear. It picked up a passport. It got funneled through some other country. Vietnam, India, Malaysia. Stamped as a product of that nation, filtered until no pollen could point back home, and slipped onto American shelves at a price no honest beekeeper could survive. Transshipment, run as a business plan. Then, in 2013, the Justice Department wrapped up the case reporters dubbed Honeygate. Back then, the biggest food fraud prosecution the country had ever seen. Brokers had been caught washing Chinese honey through third nations to skip the tariffs. Part of that laundered supply came back carrying an antibiotic that's outlawed in food altogether. That's the rare jar where just fraud stops being just fraud. So here's the machine in one sentence. An industry took a tariff written to protect you, treated the border like a rerouting puzzle, and quietly made the jar on your counter part of the laundry. Stripping the pollen was never a side effect of processing. Erasing the fingerprint was the entire point. And before you go run the test you've already seen online, the one where you drop honey into a glass of water and real honey sinks in a neat blob while fake honey clouds up. Let me save you the false confidence. That trick fails constantly. Good syrup passes it easily. If a 15-second kitchen stunt could catch this stuff, federal investigators wouldn't have burned years and a lab full of machines chasing it. The water test isn't worthless as a first glance. It's just nowhere near proof. Don't let a clip that short talk you into feeling safe. So what actually passes? Notice what the winners have in common, because it isn't a bigger name, and it isn't a higher price. It's that they have the least to hide. The first pick isn't a brand in any real sense. It's raw honey straight from a local beekeeper. The farm stand, the Saturday market, the guy down the road with a few hives out back. In that same round of testing, honey bought from markets and co-ops kept its pollen every time. One source, so there's no blend for anything to hide inside. The fingerprint is intact. And it'll go cloudy and grainy within a season, because that's precisely what honey does when nobody has processed the life out of it. You can look the person who bottled it in the eye. No barcode competes with that. The second is a shelf option, and I'm going to be straight with you about this one. Local hive markets itself on traceability. Raw, unfiltered, sourced from used beekeepers, with its own testing for antibiotics and pesticides. That's real, and it's better than most of this list. But know exactly who you're buying from. Local Hive is the old Rice's Honey, a family company from 1924 that is now owned by a private equity firm, not a family in Colorado. The honey can still be good. Just don't buy the Barn and Bees story. Buy the testing, and check the traceability seal on the back yourself. The third is Wetherspoon Raw Manuka. Manuka is the most counterfeited premium honey on earth, so the only thing that matters is whether the maker can prove what's in the jar. Wetherspoon built its entire product around that proof, a K-factor grade that guarantees a real pollen count. Its top grade certifies that 75% of the pollen grains are genuine Manuka, sourced and bottled in New Zealand under a government standard that requires every export batch to be tested before it can carry the name. It isn't cheap, it shouldn't be. Manuka at a bargain price isn't Manuka. Here, the certification is the product. The twist is the one that's run under this whole list. The honey that passes isn't the fancier label. One of the three isn't a label at all. It's a human being with hives who has nothing left to strain out. Now, 3 checks you can run yourself. And unlike that water trick, these actually tell you something. Test 1, the label. Do this tonight. Turn every jar of honey in your kitchen to face you. The ingredient line should say exactly one word, honey. Then find the country of origin. If it isn't listed at all, that's a flag. No origin usually means the pollen that would prove origin was filtered out. And scan for the words ultrafiltered, blended, or heated. Those aren't preparation notes, they're admissions. Test 2, time. Set your raw, local honey on a shelf and forget about it. Within a few months, the real thing should turn thick and grainy. That's crystallization, and it's a sign of life, not a defect. I'll level with you. It isn't proof on its own, since a few honest honeys stay smooth longer than you'd expect. But a jar that stays glass clear and pours like syrup season after season, refusing to ever change, has earned your suspicion. Test 3, price. Real beekeeping is expensive. The hives, the labor, the testing. A jar of genuine raw honey can't be produced and sold at a profit for what the bottom shelf jar costs. When the price makes no sense for real honey, the product usually isn't real honey. The math tells the truth even when the label won't. So here's where we land. You walked in for a jar of honey. You now know how to walk out with the real thing. You now know that pollen is the fingerprint and a jar with no country of origin is a jar with no fingerprint. You know, ultrafiltration is how they erase it. You know, mannose is the sugar that flags added syrup, and key 4 is the older test the fakers already learned to dodge. You know, transshipment is how foreign honey puts on an American costume. You know, NEMR is the one machine that can read the truth, and most labs can't afford it. You know the store tiers now. The drugstore jar and the big box jar are where the pollen goes to die, and the farm stand is where it survives. And you know the cruel part. The raw, the organic, the premium health halo jar you pay double for is pointed right at the shoppers trying the hardest to choose well. The whole system was built on one assumption, that you'd never turn the jar around and put the pieces together. That assumption just stopped being true. The front of the honey label is the sales pitch. The back is where the jar tells on itself. And now you can read it out loud. Ultrafiltration, mannose, transshipment, now. That's your 4 words. And the little bear on your counter has nowhere left to hide. So tell me, did your store land on this list? Walk to the kitchen right now, flip your jar over, and type the country of origin into the comments. Then tell me the brand you want pulled apart next. I read every single one, and what you pick decides where I dig. And do one thing for me. Forward this to the person who keeps a premium raw, unfiltered health honey by the kettle and pays double for the privilege before they buy the next jar.